Buenos días. Thank you, Geraldine. Me voy a hablar francés, or something like that. But I realize that most of my Francophone colleagues already have their headphones, so I'm going to just speak in English. I think it's going to be more efficient. We're supposed to have viruses here. All right, thank you. So basically, I'm not going to talk about model forests as such, but about the prehistory of model forests in Africa, because I think that's an interesting case because in Africa, it's through research, which was a quite elaborate and structured, research process that we went to model forests. And as you know, model forests as our entities are extremely different from one to another, but that share a common set of 6 principles that you probably, most of you know. Those who don't probably will have the opportunity in this, during this forum to learn more about it. But basically, we started this at the end of the 90s, a research called Adaptive Collaborative Management. At the time I was working with C4, and we work in 11 countries. There was a lot of debates, and ACM had a set of research questions. I define it here in French as, there are so many different definitions of ACM, Adaptive Collaborative Management. Some are very academic, others were more policy-oriented, like the one we did in C4, and also more oriented toward action and research, which was the first time that in C4 we were having an action research program. And one fundamental principle at the basis of adaptive collaborative management, particularly the action-oriented one, is that you look at any intervention as an experiment from which you can draw lessons, to apply for the future. And that's very interesting because the key lessons we drew in the Cameroon part of the ACM program, or what we call the ACM group, was to go toward model forests. I'm going to go very briefly, but just to give a sense of the type of situation we face when you're dealing with complex systems, complex socio-ecological systems. On one side of it, you see there it's the ecosystem side, lots of uncertainties, complexities, resilience, adaptation. And the way we define resilience in the social science is very different. It's quite different from the way it's defined by most ecologists, where you're resilient when you come back to an initial state. In the social science, a system that is resilient is a system that can change, while remaining the same. So you look at the history of capitalism, it's been going on forever, but it's been changing all along. It's a resilient system. And we have other examples of such systems. We know it's complex, we know it's uncertain. So when we talk about RED, when we talk about number of issues, we have to keep in mind that it's not done. It's very uncertain, and the thing that we are sure of is that we're going to be surprised. On the social side, you have conflicts, but all that, these 4 elements, all belong to the same set of how we relate to each other, which is alterity. Everybody is another one compared to another one. And that exists between social groups. And when you cooperate, when you have conflicts, because you're not able to manage that, when you're in a pluralist setting, it's because everyone recognizes each other. So within the ACM framework, all that thing that you have with the social system, the ecosystem, you mediate it through the knowledge system and the facilitation of how you try to manage mental models so that they can be part of a cooperative framework. Of course, this goes with approaches, tools, we'll talk about it. So we had a few key questions in ACM. And the key question is, can you have self-sustaining systems of forest management? Is it possible? And if you can have it, what are the conditions to be able to have systems that can go on, with their own means for a very long time? We looked at collaboration with a question. Is collaboration helping to build self-sustaining systems of forest management? Does it work? When does it work? When is it that it fails? Does it enable also adaptation, learning? And on the other side, is adaptation helpful to collaboration and to having systems of management that work? What is the relationship? I added these things with dots because we realized at the end of it, because there in adaptive collaborative management, you have really two blocks. The academics, they work with just collaboration, these three elements that you see, that's what they see. But in the case of the C4 process, what we call the ACM group, in a number of countries that I'll show you right now, we had what we call the facilitation hypothesis. That is, through facilitation, is it possible to accelerate a process of achieving adaptive collaborative management? And even is it even necessary to have facilitation? So these are the questions that we struggled through. It was very intense, very intellectual, very interesting. And we had also what we call ACM methods questions, because in C4 we were challenged, is it science? So, is participation, participatory enough? How scientific is participatory research? Is it science? And methods, can you empower people through methods? Is it a way to empower social groups? So that's the type of question we ask each other. And this is a quote from a traditional healer in South Africa. We went to interview him, and that's what he told us, that, I know a lot of things, you study my knowledge, you go with my knowledge, but I don't know anything more than when I met you. And I'm poor, you study my poverty, and then you get fame, and I stay poor. And you see later the relationship to what we picture as a difference between extractive science, extractive research, where you mine the knowledge of others, and interactive knowledge, where it's a more, to give and take within a more balanced field. This is very quickly 3 levels of methodology that we use in that process. You have retrospective, going to the past, interviews, surveys, all of these things look at the past, historical transects. You have, what we call prospective method, the action research, where you prospect, you learn, you experiment, you're always moving, and you do science in action in a way. And that's prospective, and also anticipatory method, where you look at scenarios, what's going to happen in the future, different types of possibilities, and so that you can anticipate things. We work in 30 research sites in about 11 countries of Asia, Latin America, and Africa. You can see them on the map. We had, in Cameroon, a number of, some differences with the bigger group. We share the broad things, but since I'm going to talk about Cameroon, outside with the thing that we had in common, there was a general disappointment about decentralization. There were studies that we did, that C4 did in Asia, which show that in many cases, at least in some cases, decentralization didn't help the poor. It didn't, help the local institutions enough. There were a process of criteria and indicators that we did in Brazil, Indonesia, and Cameroon in the 90s that also showed that research had to be more, to be more responsive to the situations. And in the case of Cameroon, we translated that there are 3 elements that needs to be kept in mind, so that research had to be policy relevant, so that influenced the way we set up our sites, that the whole idea of ACM is not only to have something of management, but also to create feedback loops between local management and the policy. So you need to have this, because without these feedbacks, it's difficult to improve. The issues of scale of sites. In the Cameroon we had landscapes. In other sites, they work more with community forests, smaller units. Because we looked at the question of sites, and particularly in relationship to policy. If you think about policy, not as we see traditionally, policy as, a group of people making decisions about how others should behave, actually you're making policies at different scales. And you have local policies. So the question for us in Cameroon was, what is the scale at which people are making policies for the local level? Today, people in the moral forest in Cameroon can see clearly that at the level of the moral forest, that's where the level at which supra-local policies are made. So we call that the supra-local, or the landscapes. In stakeholder analysis also, a difference that we had, stakeholder analysis really to look at who are the people who have stakes in the situation. most of the many, or at least very often, people come with a notion of user groups, beekeepers, people managing certain resources. In our case, we always ended up with big groups, communities, governments, logging companies, indigenous people, and so on and so forth. So this also influenced the way we dealt with this research. We had, okay, this is supposed to be 5 policy domains. I don't know how it turned out this way, but maybe between Mac and Windows. So we had 5 policy domains. One, in each domain we say, okay, we're gonna go to a place where the key question is interesting to the government. There is a wide social interest about this question. So biodiversity conservation, we went to Campoman, which is now a model forest. For forest reserve, we went to a place called Ototomo. You won't remember it, but we'll be talking about it in the lessons. For landscape mosaics, it really is it's the agroforest. It's a situation where you are rural, communities without big state-sponsored entities like parks or reserve. Of course, we have council forests, municipal forests. We have a few mayors from Cameroon. Some of them have municipal forests and also community forests. So these are the 5 domains we worked on. So when you look at the lessons, we identify 3 types of sites. The 5 sites that I gave you, type 1 is the agroforest mosaics. There, the stakeholders are not constrained by, government-sponsored entities. There is no parks and things like that. Type 2, it's mainly the community forests and the municipal forests, which are concessions that the state grants to communities or to municipalities to manage. And type 3 are parks and state reserve where you have hard boundaries. People do not have the right to enter. And it's very tense. And lots of people feel excluded, lots of conflicts that we mediated through workshops, and it was very difficult at the beginning. Very quickly, in relation, the response to ICM facilitation in the first case is that, when you're looking at agroforest, mosaics, people are eager to learn. And their main problem is how can they use more of their resources, produce more, innovate, learn, advance and develop. And this condition, we find it in all other sites, but as a secondary element. In type 2, it was relevant, it was accepted. Some people made, negotiations, some of our colleagues, to resolve, for instance, Echambor-Melen is a community forest. There was a conflict because the community forest didn't look at the way the government set it up, of the customary rights to the forest. So community forests are really forests put in common, because the people who own it are clans and lineages. So when you give a community forest, you feel like you're giving it to one community, but actually you're giving it several families putting together their resources, and this has to be thought and managed. We have also, in the case of Dimako, was a community, communal forest, a municipal forest, and in that case there were several phases: hostility, lack of trust. Then they felt that, oh, we can gain from these people, let's work with them. But when our colleagues in that case tried to negotiate a 10-year deal between the municipality and a group that about land, a local group, it blew up. So we had to pull back and deal with it. So 10 years is the boundary. They don't want to deal with it because the state grants them a concession. They don't want it to be weakened. The most contrasting place as type 3, parks and reserves. With the government, we had an excellent case. Most of the reserves in Cameroon have been encroached, they degraded. So the ONADEF came to us, the state agency, say, we want you to help us co-manage, because that's why we're going to lose this one also. So we had cooperation. The other one was a project set up externally, funded by the World Bank. They didn't believe that it was important to work with communities. It was a tokenistic acceptation of collaboration, but it didn't work well. People are here, some of them have gone through that, maybe they can come back to that. So we have lessons On power and adaptation and collaboration, one, not all stakeholders, and that's even valid today in model forest settings. Not all stakeholders have the same interest and ability to collaborate, to adapt, and learn collaboratively. The powerful actors that we work with were driven by external incentives, and they have different abilities or disabilities to collaborate, to learn. The case of Anadef I gave them, we had full collaboration from them. Campoman, we gave them 5 opportunities freely because that was our research set up to do with people. Wow, 1 minute, guy, this is terrible. Not all actors are equally important. Powerful actors have a disproportionate ability, influence, but when you look at what I'm seeing now is that with the model forest, it's a game changer. Because now you have people who are very powerful coming to seek collaboration. Because you have an entity that is bringing people together and that is more attractive to those powerful actors and that can carve its own way, its own process. We saw that in one case that the power of non-cooperation is important. We had a game that we called the right and means, the power game to negotiate the means and rights to define forest limits. Okay, so we realized that I'm not going to explain all the detail, but that you have a simple equation that we agreed in a participatory workshop, that if you have a means, 100 units of means and 100 units of rights, you want to have, you distribute it among stakeholders. What's the result? We say means minus rights give you a measure of your capacity or your handicap. That means all the things you have up there are people who, according to this statement, are in excess power. That means they have lots of power but not enough legitimacy. All the people below here have a deficit of power. They have a lot of rights, but they don't have capacity. And where people want to be, they want to be in a situation where they have rights and capacity to use their rights. And when you create that kind of setup, it's easier for people to come together and to trade their excess power or their lack of power. We have also on cooperation, cooperative and non-cooperative behaviors are mutually reinforcing. When one actor doesn't cooperate, the other one also push not to do so, and vice versa. You have lots of perception bias. These things that you see below expresses that. It's just a part that was more problematic. We did a very simple game on collaboration, one-to-one. Do you collaborate well with this group? So, it's perfect. So we ask the other group, you say it's bad. So basically, you're not on the same plane. I feel that I'm doing excellent, and the other feel I'm doing very bad. So these are the cases that we have. So it was 57% of the cases that had this perception bias on collaboration. Regarding collaboration itself, it's not a one-time go. It's not univocal. It's a dynamic chemistry of cooperative and non-cooperative behavior. And I'm talking to model forests here because the idea is that it's not because someone is not cooperating at one point that he is not going to cooperate or she is not going to cooperate later. So it is, cooperation has a time frame, it has a depth, some collaborate more than others, it has a width, some groups collaborate, whilst others don't, and so on and so forth. And collaboration, there are 2 elements also you should look at. On one side, you have my collaboration, which depends on me. It's a behavior, it's an attitude. But you have the state of collaboration, which is a relationship. And those also you assess it differently. Adaptation was also, we found that it was a key to collaboration. Because the first thing you need is to adapt to the other. So it's mutual adaptation, which is an element that you start with. And adapting to the other does not always mean you're collaborating. We had cases where people adapted. It was adversarial adaptation, where you learn to be able to go against the other one, and you adapt to to the other person. So we had several cases like that. And the thing that you have 3 types of, adaptation pressure. People want first to assimilate you, to take you into the agenda. That doesn't work. Or, they want a win-win. It's good, but it's rare. Most of the time you have to give and take, When you have conflicts, you have favorable conditions for adaptive collaboration, but you have to facilitate that and mediate it. And social learning also is very important to all that. On methods, I'm going to pass it very quickly because I already mentioned the 2 types of form that we looked at. The extractive science, where knowledge is extracted by one actor, everybody contribute, I learn everything, nobody else get anything from it. You go with your research, you don't even report back to the people, and that's very bad. And there is a correlation with top-down projects. Experts design their project, they throw it down, and it's very difficult to succeed. And you have interactive knowledge, where it's a forum where you share, everybody has something that to give as knowledge, and so it's also better when you want to develop collaborative project, the type of project that we're doing in the model forest. The most fundamental lessons that we learn is that all we did, we realized when we encountered the model forest concept, when our staff went, we told him, okay, you go and look at this. He came and said, this is ACM. Oh, okay, good and excellent. Then we turned and we realized that it's more than ACM. ACM is a software. We did a lot of negotiation, mediation, scenarios, We managed to deal with a very wide range of situations. But everywhere we worked, the institutions that were there disappeared. There was no sustainability. All the major actors that were part of our research had disappeared from the sites. They're not there. The sites are left alone. The project that sustained them vanished. They're gone. So the key element, if we want to follow through everything that Cesar has said, in terms of participation, all these things, we need vehicles, long-lasting vehicles. Eastern Ontario, they talk about 7th-generation vehicles that can last over, any project, that can, stay long and allow the people to build the capacity that they need to turn their resource endowments, because it's just endowment, it's just a possibility. You look at DRC, it's fantastically rich. Cameroon is rich, but we're not using it. You have very poor people living in extremely rich environments, so you need to have the time to build them. And that we found it in model forest, so we're not leaving it, is there. In other places, my colleagues in Mali now, they went, very briefly to say we didn't get the same solution, because ACM, every team had to innovate. In Mali now, they went to what they call spontaneous orders of cooperation. They realized they had things, they had to go with the flow, but they found that cooperation doesn't work, and the setups are very similar. So, I think there are things to learn there. In Zimbabwe, they work with user group, extremely good collaborative monitoring, which we were not able to do, but then it collapsed with the invasion of the veterans, because there were no wider collaborative framework that they could rely upon. So very, I think it's the last thing. Broad-based local ownership of the collaborative platform is key. You need policy feedback loops. We had it in ACM, but it is with a model forest that the policymakers in Cameroon got embedded into the process. They led the whole process. They knew about it. It's their thing. They own the process in the same way than local people, but not at the same intensity. But they know it's their thing. So you need to embed the collaborative forest management into a policy process, do more than just exchange, but embed it inside. And also the long-lasting, change vehicle, I already talked about it. So thank you very much.